Ethan stood alone in the cemetery, staring at the gravestone in front of him. The sky above was overcast, the air thick with the scent of rain, and the world felt strangely quiet. He had been to his father's grave before, but today was different. Today there was something about the stillness around him that made the weight of the world feel even heavier. Ethan wasn't sure what brought him here this time. He had visited the grave regularly, but this time it felt as though a deep urge pulled him to come, as if his father was calling him, even from the other side. His little hands trembled slightly as he clutched the stuffed toy he always brought with him. It was a small, worn-out bear his dad had given him, and it had been a source of comfort since his father passed away a year ago. "I miss you, Dad," Ethan whispered, his voice barely louder than the soft rustling of leaves around him. He didn't know why he said it out loud. It was something he told himself in his head every day, but today it felt like the words needed to be spoken into the quiet air. As he stood there, his gaze drifted to the ground by the edge of the grave. At first he thought it was just a trick of the light, but as he looked closer, Ethan's eyes widened. There, resting on the ground just beside the gravestone, was something odd, a small box wrapped in dark, weathered cloth. It was out of place in the cemetery, and it seemed as though it had been left there just for him. Curiosity surged through Ethan. He hesitated at first, his small heart racing as he stepped closer to the box. He glanced around, as if expecting someone to stop him, but there was no one else in sight. It was just him in the graveyard, the quiet and the mystery. With trembling fingers, Ethan knelt down and picked up the box. It was surprisingly light, almost too light for its size, and the cloth wrapping around it was worn and soft. What could it be? Ethan wondered. His father had never left him anything like this before, not in his memory. As he slowly untied the cloth, the box revealed its contents, a small wooden carved key. The key wasn't just ordinary. It had intricate symbols carved into its surface, symbols Ethan couldn't understand. It looked ancient, almost otherworldly. Ethan stared at the key, feeling a strange sensation that he couldn't explain. Was it a sign, a gift from his father? His heart pounded as he felt the weight of something unspoken in the air around him. The silence felt charged now, as though something was about to happen, something that would change everything. Was this meant for him? The key felt warm in his hand, as if it had been waiting for him to find it. What was it for? What did it unlock? Ethan looked back at his father's gravestone, a sense of unease creeping into his young mind. What did this all mean? Why had this appeared now, after all this time? There was a knot in his stomach, a mix of excitement and fear. He had always wondered what his dad would have wanted to tell him if he were still here. As he stood there, clutching the key, Ethan felt a sudden shiver down his spine. What if this was more than just a gift? What if it was a message? His father's way of reaching out from the beyond? Before he could think further, the wind picked up, rustling through the trees around him, and the sky darkened. Ethan glanced up at the clouds, sensing that the world was changing, that something was about to happen. He could feel it deep in his bones. His father's presence. He could almost feel it right beside him. Ethan couldn't take his eyes off the key. It glowed faintly in his hand, and for a moment it felt as if the entire world around him had faded away. The graveyard, the rustling leaves, the overcast sky, everything seemed distant. All that mattered in that moment was the key. It was as if it were calling to him, beckoning him to uncover its mystery. His heart raced, his small fingers tracing the intricate symbols carved into the key. What did it mean? Why had it appeared now, on his father's grave? Ethan had always wondered if there was some part of his father that had been hidden away from him, something that no one had ever told him. But this key, this strange and unexpected gift, felt like the first clue. Suddenly, Ethan snapped out of his trance. He was alone. There was no one around to help him, to explain what was going on. But was this meant for him to figure out alone? Ethan felt the heavy weight of the key in his palm as he carefully placed it into his jacket pocket. He looked around the graveyard one more time before he turned and began walking back toward the road. His small steps were quick, though his mind was racing faster. What could he do with this key? What did it open? The walk back home seemed endless. His mind swirled with questions, and as much as he tried to ignore them, he couldn't help but feel a connection between the key and the words his father had said to him before he passed. If you ever need to understand, just look for the answers, Ethan. They're closer than you think. Ethan had never really understood what those words meant, not until now. His father had always been a man of few words, but those words had stuck with him. Maybe they were a message, a clue to this key, to whatever it opened. When he arrived home, his mother wasn't there yet. She was still at work, and the house was silent. Ethan quietly went upstairs to his room and sat on the floor, pulling the key out of his pocket again. He examined it closely, feeling its weight, trying to figure out what it could possibly unlock. It looked too ancient to be something simple like a door key. There was something ceremonial about it, something that made it feel like it had a purpose beyond just opening a lock. He pulled out his father's old journal from the shelf, the one his dad had kept for years. Ethan had never dared to read it before, thinking it was private, but now he felt like he had no choice. Maybe this was the right time. Flipping through the pages, Ethan began reading the scribbled entries. Most of it was just day-to-day stuff, thoughts about work and small notes about life. But then, about halfway through, he came across a passage that made his heart stop. The key will find its way to the one who is meant to continue the work. Ethan will understand when the time comes. The secret is hidden in plain sight. All he needs is the courage to open it. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The passage was written in his father's handwriting, but it was dated years ago. It was as if his father had known this moment would come. Ethan was meant to find the key. He was meant to open whatever had been hidden away. He looked down at the key again, the weight of his father's words pressing on him. There was no turning back now. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew that whatever it was, it would change everything. The key, the journal, the message, it was all connected. Ethan stood up, his small hands shaking as he walked toward his window, looking out at the darkening sky. He was ready. Ready to face whatever this key was meant to open, whatever secret his father had left behind. The next few days felt like a blur. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the key in the journal. His thoughts raced, circling around the passage he had found, trying to make sense of it all. The key will find its way to the one who is meant to continue the work. His father's words echoed in his mind constantly, like a song he couldn't get out of his head. As much as Ethan tried to focus on school and normal life, everything felt different now. The world seemed smaller, and the weight of the key pressed on him even when he wasn't holding it. It was always with him, in his pocket, on his mind, and deep in his heart. One evening after his mother had gone to bed, Ethan decided he couldn't wait any longer. The time had come to unlock whatever his father had hidden. He couldn't ignore the pull any longer. There had to be something in his father's belongings that would make sense of it all. Ethan crept into the attic, where his father had kept old boxes and crates filled with books, papers, and other relics of the past. It was the place where he remembered his father spending long hours, sorting through old things, organizing them, and writing in his journal. The attic was where his father had always been closest to his secrets. He turned on the small light in the corner and started searching through the crates. The dust was thick on everything, and the musty smell of forgotten things filled the air. Ethan's eyes darted over the boxes, moving past old family photos and worn-out books, until one box caught his attention. It was tucked in the far corner of the attic, covered in a faded red cloth. It looked just like one of the boxes from his father's study. He opened it carefully, his heart pounding. Inside was a collection of objects, old maps, notes, and another box. This one small and locked. It was the same shape as the key. Ethan's breath quickened. This was it. This was what he had been looking for. The box, just like the one in the journal. The box his father had prepared for him to open. With trembling hands, he took the key from his pocket, its weight still unfamiliar. Would it work? He inserted the key into the lock, his heart racing as he twisted it. The box creaked open slowly, revealing its contents. Inside was a letter, yellowed with age, and a small pendant, just like the one in the picture from the journal. Ethan's fingers shook as he picked up the letter and began to read. Ethan, if you're reading this, then the time has come. The work that has been passed down through generations is now yours. The Brotherhood of the Hidden Path was formed to protect what others cannot see. It is a legacy of knowledge, power, and responsibility. The key you hold is part of something much bigger than you realize. The pendant is your guide. Wear it with caution, for it will reveal the truth when you are ready to understand. Ethan's mind raced as he processed the words. The Brotherhood of the Hidden Path? What was this? What was his father involved in? And why was this now his responsibility? He looked down at the pendant. It was small yet striking, with the same intricate symbol he had seen on the key. This was the key to understanding everything. Ethan felt both fear and awe as he realized that his father's life, his secret work, had all led up to this moment. The responsibility was now his, and with it came a choice: to step into a world of unknowns, of secrets and dangers, and to uncover the truth about the Brotherhood, or to turn away and pretend it was never meant for him. But Ethan knew he couldn't turn away. The key had found its way to him. The time had come. The pendant felt cold in Ethan's hand, despite the warmth of the attic. He stared at it, his mind racing with everything he had just learned. His father, a part of some secret society, the Brotherhood of the Hidden Path. Ethan had always known there was more to his father than he'd been told, but now he was confronted with a truth far more complicated than he ever could have imagined. The letter, the key, the pendant, they were all connected. His father had known this moment would come, and he had left him a path to follow. But what kind of path was it? And what exactly was Ethan meant to do with this legacy? The answers felt like they were just out of reach, hidden behind a veil he could not quite lift. Ethan clutched the pendant tighter, feeling its weight, wondering if he was ready for the journey his father had set him on. He was just 7 years old. What could he possibly do? Yet the more he thought about it, the more Ethan realized there was no choice. This was his responsibility now. His father had passed it down to him, whether he wanted it or not, and his father had trusted him with it. The attic suddenly felt suffocating, the walls closing in as the weight of his new reality pressed down on him. Ethan stood up and grabbed the box, cradling it against his chest. He needed answers. If the Brotherhood had been hiding something for generations, it was time to find out what. But where could he go? What could he do? Ethan ran his fingers along the edge of the box, tracing the carved symbol once more. It looked familiar, though he couldn't place it. He needed someone to help him understand. His parents had always been distant about these things, hiding the truth from him for so long. But there had to be someone who could help him unlock the meaning of all this. Then it hit him, the pendant. Maybe it wasn't just a symbol. Maybe it was a key, like the one his father had left for him. Perhaps it would guide him to the answers. Ethan took a deep breath and made his way down the attic stairs, clutching the pendant tightly. He couldn't face this alone. The only person he trusted completely was his mother. She had always been there for him, even though she had been distant ever since his father passed. Ethan had heard the hushed conversations late at night between his parents. Conversations that didn't make sense, filled with fear and secrecy. Was his mother a part of this too? Did she know the truth about the Brotherhood? Ethan found her in the kitchen, sitting at the table, her back to him as she stared out the window. He hesitated, the pendant burning in his pocket. His hand trembled as he pulled it out, holding it up in the dim light. "Mom?" he called softly, his voice barely above a whisper. His mother turned slowly, a smile flickering across her face before it faded into something more guarded. "What is it, sweetheart?" Ethan walked over to her, placing the pendant on the table in front of her. "What is this, Mom? Why did Dad leave this for me?" Her face changed in an instant. The smile was gone, replaced by a look of surprise and fear. She knew. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he looked at her. "Mom, what does this all mean? Why did Dad leave me this key in this letter?" His voice cracked, a mix of fear and frustration overwhelming him. "What am I supposed to do?" His mother's hands trembled as she reached for the pendant, picking it up and turning it over in her fingers. Her face paled as she traced the symbol on it. her eyes filled with something that could only be described as regret. "Ethan," she said, her voice tight, almost strained, "there's so much I wanted to protect you from, but it's time you knew. Your father was a part of something dangerous, and now you are too." Ethan's world spun. Dangerous? His father had been involved in something dangerous. Why hadn't anyone told him? "What do you mean? What was Dad a part of? Why didn't you tell me?" Ethan demanded, his frustration building. "I need to know." His mother's eyes filled with tears. "Your father was a protector of secrets, Ethan." The Brotherhood of the Hidden Path was a society that worked in the shadows, keeping ancient knowledge safe. Knowledge that could change the world. It's a responsibility that is passed down through generations. Your father tried to protect you from it, but now it's your turn. Ethan's head spun as the truth began to sink in. His father had been part of this secret society, and now it was his turn to step into those shoes. "But I don't want to be a part of this. I'm just a kid." Ethan's voice cracked with the intensity of his emotions. His mother's voice softened. "I know, Ethan. I know, but you don't have a choice." Ethan sat down at the table, his mind reeling with everything his mother had said. The brotherhood, the secrets, the responsibility. It was all too much. How could he, a 7-year-old boy, carry the weight of something so dangerous? He wanted to be a child, not someone caught in the middle of a legacy he hadn't chosen. But the pendant in his hand was still warm, still pulsing with an undeniable energy. His father had left this for him. It was his responsibility now. Ethan's mother sighed deeply, her gaze lingering on the pendant in her hands. She could see the confusion, the frustration in his eyes. She had always known this day would come, but she had hoped he'd be older when it did. She placed the pendant gently back on the table, her fingers trembling as she spoke, her voice full of sorrow and regret. "I wanted to keep you away from this, Ethan. I wanted to protect you. But your father, he knew this day would come. The moment he passed, it became your responsibility. You need to understand, your father was more than just a man to the Brotherhood. He was the keeper of their most guarded secret." Ethan swallowed hard, trying to comprehend her words. The keeper of a secret? What secret was so important that it had to be passed down to him, a 7-year-old boy? His small hands gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady himself. "Mom, what secret?" Ethan asked, his voice small but desperate for answers. "What was Dad really involved in? Why didn't you tell me?" His mother's eyes softened, a flicker of regret crossing her face. She placed her hand on his, her touch warm but heavy. "Because, Ethan, this life, the Brotherhood, it's dangerous. And your father didn't want you to carry that burden. He loved you too much." Ethan's mind was racing. The Brotherhood of the Hidden Path? The secret? His father had never mentioned it. Why did it feel like everything he had known about his father was being turned upside down? "What do I have to do?" Ethan whispered, the weight of everything settling on him. His eyes were wide with fear, but there was something else there too, a sense of responsibility, even though he didn't fully understand it yet. "You have to carry on your father's work, Ethan." His mother's voice cracked as she spoke. "You are the only one left. You have to protect the secret now. It's a burden, but it's also a gift. Your father believed in you, he trusted you, and now it's your turn." Ethan's mind spun as his mother's words sank in. His father had passed down more than just a legacy. He had passed down a responsibility, a duty he could not escape. The pendant, the key, the letter. It all made sense now. But how was a child supposed to carry the weight of such a secret? He looked at the pendant once more, feeling its cool surface. It was more than just a piece of jewelry. It was the key to a hidden world, a world filled with ancient knowledge and power. What was he supposed to do with it? "But what do I do with this?" Ethan asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. "What if I'm not ready? What if I don't understand?" His mother nodded, her expression soft yet resolute. "You're never really ready, Ethan. No one ever is. But you have what it takes, and I'll be here with you, every step of the way." Ethan stood up, his small body trembling as he looked at the pendant one more time. There was no going back. The secret was now his. He had to unlock it. As he reached for the pendant, a strange feeling washed over him. The air around him seemed to shift, as if the very fabric of reality had changed. He could feel the weight of the past, of his father's legacy, pushing down on him. But there was something else too. Hope. It was faint, but it was there, like a distant light at the end of a tunnel. With the pendant in his hand, Ethan knew what he had to do. The brotherhood, the secret, the key. It was all part of something much bigger than he could possibly understand. But somehow he would figure it out. For his father, for himself. Ethan stood in the quiet of the kitchen, his small hands trembling around the pendant his father had left him. The weight of his father's legacy, the mystery of the brotherhood, all of it felt too much for a boy his age. Yet somehow, deep inside, Ethan knew there was no turning back. This was his path now. His mother, standing by the door, was watching him with a quiet sadness in her eyes. She had always been the protector, the one who kept him safe from the secrets of the past. But now with his father gone, it was up to him to bear the burden. She knew that, but it didn't make it any easier. "You're not alone in this, Ethan," she said softly. "We'll figure this out together. I know it's overwhelming, but your father's work, it's important. It's more than just a legacy. It's the future." Ethan's eyes were wide, his mind spinning with everything he had learned in the past few days. The pendant, the key, the journal. It was all pointing towards something much bigger than he could understand, but he had to try. For his father. With a deep breath, he turned to face his mother. Her face was pale, but her gaze was steady. She wasn't going to stop him from taking this path. Not anymore. She couldn't. "I don't know what to do with this, Mom. I don't understand it." Ethan's voice cracked, a mixture of fear and determination in his small frame. "But I'm going to try. I have to." His mother's lips trembled as she nodded. "I know, Ethan, I know. You're stronger than you realize." Ethan stepped forward, his hand clutching the pendant tightly. This was the moment. There was no going back. As he stepped into the hallway and toward the front door, Ethan paused, looking back at the house he had always known. This house had been his safe haven, his home, where he had been shielded from the darkness. But now the world outside felt different. The secret society, the mysteries his father had been part of, it was all real. And it was now his responsibility to face it. The cool night air hit his face as he stepped outside, the pendant still warm in his hand. He could feel it pulling him, guiding him toward something, toward the truth. There was something waiting for him out there. Ethan made his way down the path toward the woods at the edge of the property, a place his father had often spoken about but never fully explained. Could the answers lie there? As Ethan ventured deeper into the trees, the light of the pendant seemed to glow brighter in his hand. It was as if it was leading him, showing him the way. The shadows of the forest loomed around him, but he didn't feel afraid. He wasn't alone. The further he walked, the clearer it became. The secret, the brotherhood, the power, it was all connected to this very moment, to Ethan. The path ahead was uncertain. The challenges, the dangers, they were real, and they would test him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. But Ethan was no longer just a little boy. He was carrying the weight of his father's legacy, and he was ready to uncover the truth. In the quiet of the night, with the pendant glowing softly in his hand, Ethan stepped forward into the unknown. He was ready.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.